The coffee hit the marble floor with a sound like a slap. It was a dark roast, scalding hot. It spread across the white stone of the Sterling Tower lobby, specifically across the reflection of the morning sun coming through the revolving doors. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't sigh. He didn't look up from the cart where he kept the disinfectant and the blue microfiber cloths folded in perfect squares. He just stopped the cart. He locked the wheels. He walked toward the mess before the liquid could reach the grout lines. "Watch it." The voice came from above him. Marcus didn't look up yet. He knew the voice. He knew the shoe size. Size 11 Italian leather, double knotted laces. He knew the salary attached to the shoes. $185,000 a year, plus a performance bonus that Marcus had personally approved 3 days ago. I said, "Watch it, Pops." Marcus stopped just short of the puddle. He looked up. Julian Vance, Vice President of Regional Sales. Julian was 32 years old. He had teeth that were too white and a suit that was too blue. He was holding a second cup of coffee, the empty one already rolling on the floor near Marcus's work boots. "Sorry, Mr. Vance," Marcus said. His voice was low, rough. It was the voice he had cultivated for 3 decades. The voice of furniture, the voice of a wall, the voice of a man who takes up no space. "You're always in the way," Julian muttered, stepping around the puddle, making sure his heel clicked loudly on the dry stone. "God, this place is going downhill. I told them we need a contracted service, not whatever this is." He gestured at Marcus. He gestured at the gray jumpsuit. The name tag stitched in red thread. "Marcus. I'll get it cleaned up, sir," Marcus said. Julian laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. "Yeah, you do that." "Try not to use that stuff that smells like lemons. It gives me a headache." Julian walked away toward the elevators. Marcus watched him go. He watched Julian press the button for the 40th floor, the executive suite. Marcus knew the code to the 40th floor. He knew the code because he owned the elevators. He owned the marble Julian walked on. He owned the HVAC system pumping conditioned air into Julian's lungs. He owned the debt structure of the building, the land rights beneath the foundation, and the shell company that paid Julian's salary. He was the majority shareholder, the silent partner, the ghost in the ledger. But to Julian, and to everyone else in Sterling Tower, Marcus was just the man who changed the trash bags. Marcus knelt. He sprayed the solution on the coffee. It didn't smell like lemons. It was odorless. He wiped the floor in smooth, circular motions. Left to right, clockwise. He was 55 years old. His knees popped when he stood up, but his hands were steady. He had bought the building 6 months ago. It was a distressed asset, a failing giant. The previous owners had let it rot from the inside out. Toxic culture, bloated middle management, failing infrastructure. Marcus had bought it anonymously. He had a plan. The janitor strategy. It sounded clever in the boardroom of his holding company. Infiltrate, observe, purge, see who treats the help like dirt. Because those are the people stealing from the company. See who kicks the dog when they think no one is watching. It was supposed to be a surgical strike, a 3-month recon mission, followed by a dramatic reveal and a restructuring. But it had been 6 months, and Marcus was still wiping floors. He picked up the empty cup Julian had dropped. He tossed it into the gray bin on his cart. The elevator chimed. Marcus checked his watch. It was a cheap plastic digital watch. He wore it on the inside of his wrist, facing the pulse. 8:55 a.m. The board meeting was at 900 a.m. They were voting on the transition strategy. They were terrified of the new owner. They had never met him. They only knew him as the Olympus Group. They imagined a faceless conglomerate or a foreign investor or an algorithm. They didn't know the owner was currently wringing out a dirty mop 30 floors below them. Marcus unlocked the wheels of his cart. He had to be there, not to sit at the table, but to clean the glass doors while they talked. He pushed the cart toward the service elevator. The ride up was slow. It smelled of oil and old steel. When the doors opened on the 40th floor, the air changed. It was cooler up here. It smelled of ozone and expensive cologne. The boardroom was at the end of the hall, glass walls, floor to ceiling windows overlooking the city. The view cost $10,000 a month per office. Marcus parked his cart outside the main doors. He took out the glass cleaner and a fresh cloth. Inside, the room was already full. 12 people. 10 men, 2 women. Julian was there, sitting near the end of the table, tapping on his phone. At the head of the table sat Richard Sterling, the former owner, now retained as CEO during the transition. Richard looked tired. He looked like a man who was trying to hold water in his hands. "The Olympus Group is demanding a 15% reduction in overhead by Q3, Richard said. His voice was muffled through the glass, but Marcus could hear him clearly. Marcus sprayed the glass door. Squirt, squirt. He began to wipe inside the room. Heads turned toward the sound. Then they turned back. He was invisible. 15% is a bloodbath, Julian said, leaning back. "We can't cut sales. We're the only thing keeping the lights on. Cut support staff. Cut maintenance. Look at the state of the lobby. Why are we paying for full-time janitorial when we could outsource it to an agency for half the cost?" Marcus wiped a smudge near the door handle. He paused. He held the cloth against the glass. He was listening to his own termination being discussed by a man whose car lease he effectively paid. "Why need the infrastructure?" Richard argued weakly. "The building is old. The building is a dump," Julian corrected. "And the staff matches the decor. Lauder." Short, nervous laughter. Marcus felt a tightness in his chest. It wasn't anger. It was something colder. It was the realization of how easy it was for them. How naturally the cruelty flowed when the balance sheet was on the table. Then the door opened. A young man hurried in. He was carrying a tray of water pitchers and crystal glasses. Elias, he was 22, black, fresh out of college, an unpaid intern trying to get a foot in the door of the finance world. Marcus knew Elias. He knew Elias arrived at 6:30 a.m. every day. He knew Elias took the bus from the south side. He knew Elias ironed his shirt every morning, but the collar was fraying at the edges because he couldn't afford a new one. Elias was nervous. The tray was heavy. "Sorry I'm late," Elias whispered. "The elevator, just put it down," Julian snapped. "Jesus! Can we get some competence in here?" Elias flinched. The tray tilted. It wasn't a big mistake. Just a shift in gravity. But the heavy crystal pitcher slid. It hit the mahogany table. Water. A gallon of ice water flooded across the polished wood. It soaked the papers. It soaked the leather binders. It ran off the edge and splashed onto Julian's lap. The room went silent. Dead silent. For a second, the only sound was the drip, drip, drip of water hitting the carpet. Marcus stood outside the glass. His hand was frozen on the door handle. He watched Elias's face. The boy's eyes went wide. His skin went ashy. He looked terrified, not just embarrassed, terrified. Like he wasn't looking at a wet table. Like he was looking at the end of his life. "You idiot," Julian whispered. He stood up slowly. Water dripped from his trousers. "You absolute, incompetent little..." Julian didn't finish the sentence. He slammed his hand on the table. "Get out," Julian screamed. The sound penetrated the glass. "Get a towel!" Richard yelled, trying to save the documents. Elias was paralyzed. He was shaking. I'm sorry, I..." "Don't speak," Julian hissed. He walked around the table. He loomed over Elias. Julian was 6 feet tall. Elias was slighter, smaller. "Look at this." Julian pointed at his pants. "Do you know how much this suit costs? More than your family makes in a year." It was a lie. But it was a weapon. Marcus gripped the handle of the spray bottle. His knuckles turned white. He could open the door. He could walk in. He could say 3 words, "I am Olympus." He could fire Julian. He could tell Elias it was okay. He could end the charade right now. He had the power. He owned the building. He owned the table. He owned the moment. But if he did, the audit wasn't finished. The corruption in the accounting department. The investigation he was running at night, digging through the trash, cloning hard drives, was only halfway done. If he revealed himself now, the rats would scatter. The evidence would disappear. The system he was trying to dismantle would survive, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the next owner. He had to choose the boy or the building, the individual dignity of one young man, or the future of the entire enterprise. Marcus watched Julian shove Elias backward. Not hard enough to knock him down, but hard enough to humiliate. "Get the janitor," Julian spat, "and then get your box." "You're done." Elias looked the door. He looked right at Marcus. His eyes were pleading. He saw another black man standing there, an elder. He was looking for an ally, a witness, someone to say, "This is wrong." Marcus stared back through the glass. He felt the weight of the keys in his pocket, the master key that opened every door. He breathed in. He breathed out. He made his choice. Marcus opened the door. He didn't look at Elias. He didn't look at Julian. He kept his head down. He walked into the room, pushing his cart. "I'll get it, sir," Marcus said. He dropped a thick white towel onto the puddle. He got down on his knees at Julian's feet. He began to blot the water from the carpet. "That's right," Julian said, stepping back, wiping his hands as if Elias had contaminated him. "Clean it up. That's all you're good for?" Elias made a sound. A small, choked sob. He ran past Marcus. He ran out of the room. Marcus didn't turn. He scrubbed the carpet. He scrubbed until the friction burned his fingertips. He let the boy run. He let the bully win. He protected the secret. But as he stared at the wet fibers of the rug, Marcus realized something. The coffee stain in the lobby hadn't been an accident. And this wasn't an accident either. It was a pattern. And he had just signed his name to it. The meeting resumed before the door latched shut. Marcus was still in the room. He was still on his knees, pressing the white towel into the expensive wool blend of the carpet. He was 10 feet away from them. But to the 12 people sitting around the mahogany table, he had ceased to exist. He was furniture. He was a mechanism of maintenance. "As I was saying," Julian said. His voice was calm again. The rage was gone. It had evaporated the moment Elias left the room. It was a switch. On-off. The Q3 projections rely on efficiency, Julian continued, clicking a button on a remote. A graph appeared on the wall screen, a red line going up. If we trim the support staff, we increase the EBITDA by 4 points. The Olympus group wants lean. We give them lean. Marcus lifted the towel. It was heavy with water. He folded it, wet side in, and placed it in the gray bucket. He stood up. He didn't look at Julian. He looked at the spot on the carpet. It was darker than the surrounding wool, a shadow, but it would dry. By tomorrow it would be invisible. "What about the intern program?" Richard asked. He sounded weary. "We get tax credits for that." Julian waved a hand, a dismissive gesture. "High turnover," he said. "You saw it yourself just now." Unskilled, unprepared. "We're running a business, Richard, not a charity. If they can't handle a pitcher of water, they can't handle a portfolio." Hets. Marcus pushed his cart toward the door. They. The word hung in the air. It wasn't specific. It was a bucket. A category. It was the linguistic tool used to turn a person into a problem. Marcus opened the door. "Make sure that dries before the afternoon session," Julian called out without turning his head. "I don't want the room smelling like mildew." "Yes, sir," Marcus said. He slipped out into the hallway. The door clicked shut. The sound of the voices was cut off instantly by the soundproofing. Silence. The hallway was long, empty, and perfectly conditioned to 72 degrees. Marcus walked. His boots made no sound on the runner. He felt sick. Not a violent sickness. A dull, heavy stone in the pit of his stomach. He pushed the cart to the service elevator. He pressed the button. He waited. He looked at his reflection in the polished brass of the elevator doors. Gray jumpsuit. Gray hair. Eyes that looked tired. "I am the owner," he thought. He said it in his head like a mantra. "I am the owner. I am doing this for the greater good. I am gathering evidence." If he had spoken up in that room, Julian would have locked him out. Julian would have shredded the files. Julian would have buried the bodies. To catch a predator, you have to stay in the long grass. You have to be still, even when the predator eats something right in front of you. The elevator arrived. Marcus stepped in. He took it down to the mezzanine level. The Human Resources Department. He didn't need to go there. His route sheet said the bathrooms on the 12th floor were next. But gravity pulled him to the mezzanine. He parked the cart outside the frosted glass doors of the HR suite. He took a feather duster from his belt. A prop. He began to dust the leaves of the artificial ficus plant in the corner. He listened. The walls were thin here. "I need the termination packet by noon," a woman's voice said. Linda, Director of People and Culture. "What do I put for the cause?" Another voice asked. A younger woman. An assistant. "Insubordination," Linda said. Her voice was flat. "Board and property damage?" "He ruined a suit." "Should I conduct an exit interview?" "No," Linda said. "He's an at-will contractor. Just cut the access card. And tell security to escort him. I don't want a scene." A scene. That's what a human reaction was called in this building. A scene. Disruption of the workflow. Marcus dusted the plastic leaves. Back and forth? "What about his pay?" the assistant asked. "He worked half the week." There was a pause, the sound of a keyboard clacking. "Deduct the cleaning fee for the carpet and the dry cleaning for Mr. Vance," Linda said. That should zero it out. Actually, he might owe us. Just mark it as settle it out. 2 weeks of work, early mornings. The cost of the bus. The cost of the iron shirt. Erased by a dry cleaning bill. Marcus stopped dusting. His hand shook slightly. He knew the numbers. He knew Sterling Tower generated $12 million in net profit annually. He knew Julian Vance had expensed a $300 lunch at a steakhouse yesterday. And yet, they were balancing the books on the back of a 22-year-old boy. Marcus turned away from the plant. He walked to the reception desk. The receptionist, a woman named Sarah, who usually smiled at him, was on the phone. She looked stressed. I know, she was saying into her headset. We're handling it. Yes, we had a security incident. No, everyone is safe. It was just an unstable employee. Unstable. The story was already changing. It was mutating. Elias wasn't clumsy anymore. He was unstable. He was a threat. This was how the system protected itself. It didn't just remove the person. It rewrote their character so that their removal seemed necessary, inevitable, even benevolent. Marcus walked past the desk. He walked to the bank of cubicles at the back of the floor. The bullpen, where the intern sat. Cubicle 4B, it was empty. The chair was pushed in. The monitor was black. A cardboard box sat on the desk. It was half full. A framed photo of a woman, maybe his mother. A stapler. A bag of almonds. A notebook with a black cover. Marcus stopped. He looked around. No one was watching. The other interns were staring at their screens, heads down, terrified. They were working harder than usual. They had seen the lion take one of the herd. They were making themselves small. Marcus stepped into the cubicle. He reached for the notebook. He shouldn't touch it. It wasn't his. But he opened it. The handwriting was neat, precise. Monday, learn the proprietary trading platform. Tuesday, ask Mr. Vance about mentorship opportunities. Goal, pay off mom's car by December. Marcus closed the book. His thumb brushed the cover. Ask Mr. Vance about mentorship. The irony tasted like copper in his mouth. Hey, Marcus jumped. He turned. A security guard was standing at the entrance of the cubicle. Gary. Gary was a good man. He always asked Marcus about his weekend. He had 2 kids in college. But right now, Gary wasn't a friend. He was a uniform. What are you doing? Marcus? Gary asked. Just cleaning, Gary, Marcus said. Saw the box. Thought it was trash. Gary sighed. He walked over. He looked tired, too. It's not trash. It's the kid's stuff. I gotta take it down to the lobby. He's waiting at the turnstiles. He's still here? Marcus asked. Yeah. Waiting for his release papers. Gary shook his head. Damn shame. He was a polite kid. Always said good morning. What happened? Marcus asked. He knew. But he needed to hear the version Gary had been fed. Gary lowered his voice. Word as he tried to attack Mr. Vance. Threw a pitcher of water at him. Snapped under the pressure. Gary tapped his temple. Some people just aren't built for this environment, you know. It's a high-stress game. Gotta have thick skin. Marcus nodded. Yeah, Marcus said. Thick skin. I'll take the box, Gary said. He picked it up. He didn't look through it. He didn't see the notebook with the goals written in it. He just saw a unit of inventory to be moved. You missed a spot there. Gary pointed to a dust bunny in the corner of the cubicle. I'll get it, Marcus said. Gary walked away, the box tucked under his arm. Marcus watched him go. He turned back to the corner. He knelt down. He picked up the dust bunny with his gloved hand. He stayed on his knees for a long moment. This was the trap. The system didn't require everyone to be evil. Gary wasn't evil. Sarah wasn't evil. They were just doing their jobs. Processing the form. Escorting the guest. Telling the story. They were the gears. And Marcus, he was the oil. He kept the place clean so the gears could turn without grinding. He stood up. He needed to get back to the basement. He needed to log into his secure server. He needed to see exactly what Julian Vance was hiding in the regional sales accounts. Because now it wasn't just about business. It wasn't just about efficiency or corruption or the bottom line. Now, he had a debt. He had bought his cover story with Elias's future. He had traded a young man's dignity for a few more weeks of anonymity. The price was too high, but he had already paid it. So he had to make sure he got what he paid for. Marcus walked back to the elevator. As he waited, 2 junior executives walked past him. They were laughing. Did you see his face? One of them said. Total meltdown. I heard he was crying in the lobby, the other said. Pathetic. The elevator arrived. Marcus stepped in. The doors closed, shutting out the laughter. He was alone in the metal box. He looked at his hands. They were clean. They smelled of sanitizer and soap. But as the elevator dropped, plummeting toward the foundation of the building he owned, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how hard he scrubbed out, he would never get the stain out. The building breathed differently at night. The HVAC systems throttled down to a low, rhythmic thrum. The lights in the corridors dimmed to a conservation mode, leaving long stretches of shadow between pools of halogen. It was 200 a.m. Marcus was on the 14th floor. Accounting, he wasn't cleaning. He was sitting at a desk in the back corner, the one belonging to the junior comptroller. The computer was unlocked. Marcus had unlocked it, not with a password, but with a USB drive that bypassed the local security protocols. He owned the protocols. He had the master key for the digital doors, just as he had for the physical ones. The screen cast a blue pallor over his face. He scrolled through the ledgers. He was looking for the Julian pattern. He found it. It wasn't subtle. It was arrogant. Vendor payments to Apex Consulting, Zenith Strategy, Summit Solutions, all billed for sales training and market penetration analysis, all approved by Julian Vance. All just under the $10,000 limit that required a second signature. Marcus clicked on the metadata for the invoices. They were created on the same machine. A laptop with a MAC address that Marcus recognized. It was Julian's personal MacBook. He was stealing. Plain and simple. He was siphoning money out of the company he claimed to be saving, while firing interns to save the cost of a dry cleaning bill. Marcus felt a surge of validation. This was it. The smoking gun. He could call the police. He could call the board. He reached for his phone. Then he stopped. He looked at the dates on the invoices. August 12th, September 14th, October 10th. Regular as a heartbeat. But there was a gap. November. No payments in November. Why? Marcus dug deeper. He cross-referenced the HR files. In November, there had been an internal audit, a routine check. And in November, a senior accountant named David Chen had been fired. The cause listed, gross negligence. Misallocation of funds. Marcus froze. He opened David Chen's file. David had been with the company for 8 years. A spotless record. Then, 1 week before the audit concluded, David was gone. And the day after David left, the payments to Apex Consulting resumed. Marcus leaned back in the stolen chair. The pattern wasn't just theft, it was sacrifice. Julian didn't just steal money. He stole reputations. He created errors. He created messes. And then he found someone to blame for them. David Chen wasn't negligent. David Chen had probably asked a question. What is Apex Consulting? And for asking that question, he had been erased. Just like Elias. The vacuum cleaner roared to life down the hall. Marcus jumped. He yanked the USB drive. He shut down the monitor. He grabbed his spray bottle and cloth. He was just a janitor again. The door opened. It was Maria. She was 60 years old. She pushed a heavy industrial vacuum. She saw Marcus and stopped. She killed the motor. The silence rushed back in. Marcus? She said. Her accent was thick. You scare me. Sorry, Maria, Marcus said. Just checking the trash. She looked at him. She looked at the desk. She knew he wasn't checking the trash, but she didn't ask. In the ecosystem of the night shift, you didn't ask questions. You just survived. You hear about the boy? Maria asked. She leaned on the handle of the vacuum. She looked tired. Bone-tired. Elias. I heard. Hey, good boy, Maria said. She crossed herself. He hold the elevator for me. Always say Mrs. Maria, not just hey you. He didn't deserve it, Marcus said. Deserve? Maria laughed. A dry, humorless sound. This place don't care about deserve. The building eats. She gestured around at the silent cubicles. It eats the young ones first. Soft bones. It's gonna stop, Marcus said. He hadn't meant to say it. The words just slipped out. Maria looked at him sharply. Don't, she said. Don't what? Don't think you can stop the eating. You are furniture, Marcus, like me. If the table breaks, they buy a new table. If the floor is dirty, they mop it. If the mop breaks, she trailed off. They throw it away. Marcus finished. Yes, she said. David, the accountant. He was nice too. He gave me a box of chocolates for Christmas. He was framed, Marcus said. Maria shrugged. He is gone. That is what matters. The why doesn't matter? She turned the vacuum back on. The roar filled the room, ending the conversation. She moved away, pushing the machine over the gray carpet, erasing the footprints of the day. Marcus stood in the dark. He had the evidence. He had the moral high ground. But Maria's words stuck in his throat. The why doesn't matter. He was playing detective. He was playing a game of chess against Julian. But for the people actually living in the building, it wasn't a game. It was a natural disaster. You don't fight a hurricane, you hide. Marcus left the office. He went to the basement, to his small room behind the boiler. He didn't sleep. He sat on his cot and watched the numbers on his tablet. He needed more. The fraud was good, but it wasn't enough to destroy the system that allowed Julian to exist. If he fired Julian now, the board would just hire another shark. He needed to expose the board's negligence. He needed to prove they knew, or should have known. He needed to implicate Richard Sterling. He needed to burn the whole field so nothing like this could grow again. Just a few more days, he told himself. I just need a few more days. The sun rose, 6:00 a.m., the building woke up, the elevators started moving, the coffee machines started grinding. Marcus put on his fresh uniform. He went to the lobby. He started polishing the brass railings near the turnstiles. At 8:45 a.m., Julian walked in. He wasn't alone. He was walking with a young woman. She was maybe 23, sharp suit, eager eyes, carrying a leather portfolio. She looked exactly like Elias, but different. Same hunger, same fear. And this is the main concourse, Julian was saying, sweeping his hand grandly. It's a fast-paced environment, Sarah. Sink or swim. We don't hold hands here. I understand, Mr. Vance, she said. I'm ready to work. Good, Julian said. We had an opening unexpectedly yesterday. The previous intern couldn't handle the velocity. He smiled. It was a shark's smile. I have a feeling you're different. They walked past Marcus. Julian didn't see him. But the girl did. She glanced at the old man polishing the rail. She smiled tentatively, a reflex of politeness. Good morning, she whispered. Marcus looked at her. He saw the future. He saw the late nights. He saw the impossible demands. He saw the inevitable mistake. He saw the scapegoat she would become when Julian needed to cover his next withdrawal. He wanted to grab her arm. He wanted to say, run. Get out. He is a thief and a butcher. He wanted to say it, I own this railing. I own the air you are breathing. You are safe if I say you are safe. But he didn't. He nodded. Morning, miss, he said. His voice was the voice of a wall. She walked on. She followed Julian into the elevator. The doors closed. They were swallowed by the shaft. Marcus went back to polishing. The brass was already shining. He was just rubbing away his own reflection. He told himself he was protecting her. He told himself that by waiting, by building the perfect case, he would save all of them. But as the cloth moved in small, tight circles, a colder thought crept in. Maybe he wasn't waiting because he needed more evidence. Maybe he was waiting because he was afraid, not of Julian, but of the chaos. He was a man of order. He fixed things. He cleaned things. Blowing up the company, firing the executives, revealing himself. That was messy. That was a spill he couldn't just wipe up. So he let the girl get on the elevator. He let the cycle repeat. He let the system eat one more meal, promising himself it would be the last. Around him, the lobby filled with people. Suits, briefcases, phones. They all walked over the marble he had cleaned. They all ignored him. And for the first time, Marcus was glad. He didn't want them to look at him. He didn't want them to see the man who had the power to stop the machine, but who just kept oiling the gears. He sprayed the glass. Squirt, he wiped it clean, erasing the evidence of his own touch. Gray clouds pressed against the glass skin of the Sterling Tower. Inside, the pressure was lower, heavier. Marcus was in the executive bathroom on the 40th floor. It was his sanctuary, the one place where the powerful were vulnerable, where they ceased to be titles and became biological functions. He was refilling the hand soap, lavender and sea salt. The door burst open. It was Julian. He was on the phone. He didn't check the stalls. He assumed privacy because he felt entitled to it. I don't care about the trace! Julian hissed into his mobile. Bury it in the marketing spend. No one looks at marketing. It's a black hole. He paced the tiled floor. Yeah, well, if Richard asks, tell him it was a focus group study for the new demographic. Just move the money. Today I need the cash in the Cayman account by Friday. Marcus froze. His hand was inside the soap dispenser mechanism. Friday. Why Friday? Because I'm out of here, Julian said. I'm tendering my resignation Monday morning, taking the package and running before the Olympus audit hits. Let the old man sink with the ship. Julian laughed. Exactly. The janitor will be cleaning up my mess for years. Marcus stopped breathing. It wasn't a metaphor. Julian was literally laughing at him. Julian finished his business at the urinal, zipped up, and washed his hands. He looked in the mirror. He fixed his tie. He looked right at the reflection of the stall door behind him. He didn't see Marcus because the door was closed. But Marcus saw him through the crack. He saw the smugness, the absolute lack of fear. Julian left. Marcus waited 5 seconds, 10. He came out. The soap dispenser was still open. Monday. Julian was leaving. All the evidence Marcus was gathering, the intricate case he was building to trap Julian and the board, it was about to become history. If Julian left on Monday with a severance package, he won. He would disappear with the stolen money. The board would cover it up to save face. And the new intern, the girl from the elevator, she would be left in the wreckage. Marcus walked out of the bathroom. He needed to act. Now, he couldn't wait for the perfect moment. He had to force the hand. He went to the service closet. He changed out of his jumpsuit. Underneath, he wore a button-down shirt. It was wrinkled, but it was clean. He put on a blazer he kept in his locker. It was 10 years old. He looked like a man trying to look important. He went to the elevator. He pressed 40. He walked to the receptionist at the executive suite. "I need to see Mr. Sterling," Marcus said. The receptionist, a young man named Kevin, looked up. He frowned. "Marcus, what are you doing? Is there a leak?" "No leak," Marcus said. "I need to speak to the CEO. It's personal." Kevin laughed. "Marcus, you can't just walk in. Mr. Sterling is in a strategy meeting with Mr. Vance." "It's about Mr. Vance," Marcus said. Tell him I have the USB drive." Kevin stared. "What?" "Just tell him." Kevin hesitated. He saw something in Marcus's eyes, a density, a gravity that shouldn't belong to a janitor. "Okay? Wait here." Kevin picked up the phone. He whispered. He hung up. He says to come in, but make it fast." Marcus walked to the double doors. He pushed them open. The boardroom again. Richard Sterling was at the head. Julian was at his right. They both looked at him. Richard looked confused. Julian looked annoyed. "This better be good, Pops," Julian said. I was in the middle of a sentence. Marcus walked to the table. He didn't have a cart this time. He didn't have a cloth. He placed the USB drive on the mahogany. It was a small silver object. "This drive," Marcus said, his voice steady, "contains the logs of every transaction made to Apex Consulting over the last 18 months. It also contains the metadata linking those invoices to your personal computer, Mr. Vance." Silence. Julian stared at the drive. His face didn't crumble. It froze. Richard looked at the drive, then at Marcus. "Where did you get this?" Richard asked. "I found it," Marcus lied. "In the trash, Mr. Vance threw it away." It was a weak lie, but it was a bridge. Julian stood up. "This is ridiculous," he said. He laughed, but it sounded thin. "He's stealing corporate property. He's probably hacking." "Security." "Sit down, Julian," Richard said softly. Julian stopped. "Richard, you can't listen to the help." He's clearly disgruntled. Probably mad about the coffee spill. "I checked the logs, Julian," Richard said. He looked at his laptop screen. While Marcus was walking in, "I just did a quick query on the Apex account." Richard looked up. His eyes were cold. "It's empty. The vendor doesn't exist in the state registry." Julian's mouth opened, then closed. The air left the room. Marcus felt a surge of triumph. He had done it. He had exposed the rot. "You're fired, Julian," Richard said. "Effective immediately. Get your things." Julian looked around the room. He looked at the view. He looked at his hands. Then he looked at Marcus, and he smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a man who knows a joke no one else gets. "Okay," Julian said. "You got me." "Good job, Richard." "Good job, Marcus." He said the name like a slur. Julian walked out. He didn't fight. He didn't scream. He just left. Richard sighed. He rubbed his temples. "Thank you, Marcus," Richard said. "You did the company a great service. We'll give you a bonus this month. $50 for saving millions." "Sir," Marcus said. "There's more." "More." "The intern. Elias. He was fired because of Julian. He should be reinstated." Richard waved his hand. "That's HR, Marcus, not my department. Besides, the paperwork is done. We can't undo a termination." "But it was based on a lie," Marcus insisted. "It was based on a performance issue," Richard said, his voice hardening. "Look, take the win, Marcus. You got the bad guy. Don't push your luck." Richard turned back to his laptop. "You can go now." Marcus stood there. He realized the trap. He had cut off the head of the snake, but the body was still writhing. The system hadn't changed. Richard didn't care about justice. He cared that Julian got caught. Elias was still gone. The new intern was still in danger. And Marcus was still just a janitor with a $50 bonus. He looked at Richard Sterling, the man he had kept in power, the man he had protected by hiding his identity. "I'm not leaving," Marcus said. Richard looked up. "Excuse me," I said. "I'm not leaving." Marcus reached into his pocket. He pulled out a key card. It wasn't a white employee card. It was black, matte black, no name. He tossed it onto the table next to the USB drive. "You're not going to give me a $50 bonus, Richard." Marcus leaned forward. "Because I'm not the janitor." Richard looked at the card. His eyes went wide. He recognized it. It was the founder's card, the Olympus key. There were only 3 in existence. "You?" Richard whispered. "I'm Marcus King," Marcus said, "chairman of the Olympus Group, and I own this chair you're sitting in." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a world turning upside down. Richard stood up. His chair fell backward. "Mr. King." "I didn't know. I know what you thought," Marcus said. "You thought the building cleaned itself." He walked around the table. He stood at the head. "Sit down, Richard." Richard sat. He was shaking. "We have work to do," Marcus said. "Julian was a symptom. You are the disease." It felt good. It felt righteous. He was the hero. He was the undercover boss revealed, the justice dispenser. But then the door opened again. "Security. 2 guards. Not Gary. New guys, Mr. Sterling," one of them said. "We got a call from Mr. Vance. He said there was an intruder making threats." Richard looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at Richard. This was the test. Richard could tell the truth. He could bow to the new king. Or Richard looked at the black card on the table. He looked at Marcus's wrinkled shirt, his rough hands. Richard calculated. If he acknowledged Marcus as the owner, Richard was finished. He would be fired for negligence, his reputation destroyed. But if Marcus was just a crazy janitor, if Marcus was unstable, Richard could survive. He could spin the story. He could say the card was stolen. He could say Marcus had snapped. Richard looked at the guards. "Yes," Richard said slowly. "There's an intruder." He pointed at Marcus. "Remove him." Marcus stared. "Richard," he warned. "Don't do this. He's delusional," Richard told the guards. "He thinks he owns the building. Get him out before he hurts someone." The guards moved. They grabbed Marcus's arms. "Sir, I am the owner!" Marcus shouted. But it sounded crazy even to his own ears. A man in a cheap blazer, shouting about owning a skyscraper. It was the classic rant of the powerless. "Sure, buddy," the guard said. "And I'm the Queen of England. Let's go." They dragged him toward the door. Marcus looked back at Richard. Richard picked up the black card. He slipped it into his pocket. He picked up the USB drive. He slipped that into his pocket too. He had the evidence. He had the access. He had just stolen the company from the owner, using the very prejudices Marcus had tried to expose. Marcus was shoved into the hallway. The door closed. He wasn't the owner anymore. He was just another spill to be wiped up. The interrogation room in the basement of the precinct smelled of stale coffee and ammonia. Marcus sat on a metal chair bolted to the floor. His hands were not cuffed, but they felt heavy. He had been there for 4 hours. "Let's go over it again," the detective said. Detective Miller, young, tired. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "You claim to be Marcus King, the CEO of Olympus Group?" "I am," Marcus said. His voice was hoarse. "Okay. And you say you bought the Sterling Tower 6 months ago through a shell company?" "Yes." "And you decided to work as a janitor to spy on the employees?" "To audit the culture," Marcus corrected. Miller sighed. He rubbed his face. "Right. Audit the culture." He tapped a file on the table. "Here's the problem, Mr. King. Or Marcus. We called the Olympus Group headquarters in New York." Marcus sat up straighter. And they said Marcus King is currently in Geneva, at a summit." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "That's impossible." "I'm right here." "They sent a photo," Miller said. He slid a glossy print across the table. It showed a man standing at a podium. A black man. Bald, like Marcus. Similar build. Wearing a $3,000 suit. "That's not me," Marcus whispered. "No," Miller agreed. "It's not. That is Marcus King." The room spun. Richard. Richard hadn't just stolen the card, he had activated the contingency. The face. Every billionaire had a double, a public face for security risks, a proxy. Marcus had set up the proxy protocol himself years ago, in case of kidnapping, in case of blackmail. If the real Marcus went dark, the proxy would step in to stabilize the stock price. Richard must have called the board. He must have triggered the CO compromised alert using Marcus's own black card. He had locked Marcus out of his own life. Look, Miller said, his voice softening. We see this sometimes. Dissociative episodes, stress. You work hard, Marcus. 30 years pushing a mop. You see these rich guys, you start to imagine. What if? I am not imagining it, Marcus said. But the fight was leaking out of him. Sterling dropped the charges, Miller said. Trespassing, harassment, theft of the access card. He said you're a long-time employee. He doesn't want to ruin your life. He just wants you to get help. Help. The final insult. Richard was painting himself as the benevolent patriarch, forgiving the crazy old uncle. So I'm free to go? Marcus asked. Yeah, but you can't go back there. Restraining order, 500 feet. Miller stood up. Go home, Marcus. Get some sleep. Marcus walked out of the station. It was night again. The city lights were blurred by a fine mist of rain. He had no phone, no wallet. Just the clothes on his back and the cash in his pocket. $40. He walked to a payphone. Yes, they still existed in this part of town. He dialed the emergency number for his personal lawyer. Disconnected. He dialed the private line for his Swiss banker. Number not in service. Richard had been thorough. With the black card, he had access to the security override. He had burned the bridges. Marcus stood on the corner. He was a billionaire. He owned islands. He owned satellites. And he was homeless. He walked. He found himself standing across the street from Sterling Tower. It glowed like a monolith in the rain. He saw the lights on the 40th floor. He imagined Richard sitting there, drinking the scotch Marcus had bought, looking at the city Marcus owned. He saw a figure come out of the revolving doors. It was the new intern. The girl. She was carrying a box. She was crying. She stood on the curb, looking lost. Marcus watched her. The cycle was complete. Julian was gone, but the system had just replaced him with someone else. Someone who needed to fire an intern to prove they were tough. Maybe Richard had done it himself. Marcus crossed the street. He shouldn't. The restraining order. But he didn't care. He walked up to the girl. Miss? She jumped. She looked at him. She recognized the blazer, the face. The janitor. She sniffed. I heard you went crazy. I heard that too, Marcus said gently. What happened? She gestured at the box. I don't know. Mr. Sterling, he called me in. He said there was a leak. He said I talked to the press about Mr. Vance. I didn't say anything. I know, Marcus said. He said I was a liability, she sobbed. My first week. Marcus looked at the building. He realized his mistake. He had tried to change the system from the bottom up. He had tried to use the tools of the weak. Observation, silence, moral shaming. But the system didn't care about morals. It cared about power. And he had given his power away the moment he put on the jumpsuit. He couldn't win as a janitor. And now, he couldn't win as a CEO either. He was erased. But he still had one thing. He knew the building, not the finances, not the legal structure. The building, the pipes, the wires, the bones. What's your name? Marcus asked. Chloe, she said. Chloe? Marcus said. Do you have a class? Around the corner. Good. Go home. Don't look back. This place, it's not for you. What are you going to do? She asked. Marcus looked at the service entrance. The lock was digital, but the backup was mechanical. A keyway hidden under the plate. He still had his master key ring. The police hadn't taken it. They thought it was just janitor junk. Why have one last job to do? Marcus said. Chloe walked away. Marcus walked to the alley. He unlocked the service door. He slipped into the darkness. He didn't go to the elevators. He went down to the sub-basement, to the room where the main water main met the pressure valves for the fire suppression system. He stood before the wheel. It was red, massive. If he turned it, he could flood the basement. He could short out the main servers. He could kill the brain of the building. It would cost millions. It would destroy the records. It would force a total shutdown. It would hurt Richard. But it would also hurt the cleaning crew, the security guards, the receptionists. They would be out of work for months. Marcus put his hands on the wheel. The cold steel bit into his palms. He was the owner. He had the right to destroy his own property. But was he the owner? Or was he just an angry man in a basement? He thought of Elias. He thought of Chloe. He thought of David Chen. He thought of the way Julian had looked at him, like he was nothing. He gripped the wheel. He began to turn. Creak, the metal groaned. The water pressure gauge spiked. One more turn. That's all it would take to burst the seal. He gritted his teeth. He pushed. And then he stopped. His hands shook. He couldn't do it. He wasn't Julian. He wasn't Richard. He didn't destroy things to make a point. He fixed things. He let go of the wheel. He sagged against the pipe. He had lost, completely and utterly. He turned to leave. And then he saw it. On the wall behind the pipes, a panel. Not a utility panel, a breaker box, but old. Very old. He remembered the blueprints from the purchase. The building was built in the 1920s. It had a legacy pneumatic tube system, long abandoned. But the tubes ran everywhere, into every office, behind every wall, and the central hub was right here. Marcus opened the panel. The tubes were dusty but intact. He looked at the map on the inside of the door. Tube 40A, executive boardroom. He reached into his pocket. He didn't have the USB drive. Richard had that. But he had his phone. He had recorded the meeting, not on the phone's drive, on a cloud backup. An audio file. Julian confessing. Richard conspiring. The theft of the identity. He took out his phone. He accessed the file. He set it to loop. He connected the phone to the building's PA system override. A dusty jack meant for emergency broadcasts, located right next to the tube hub. He punched the code. 1000. Default. They never changed it. The speakers in the building crackled. Marcus pressed play. He didn't flood the building with water. He flooded it with truth. I don't care about the trace! Buried in the marketing spend, Julian's voice echoed through the empty lobby, through the hallways, through the elevators. You're not going to give me a $50 bonus, Richard, because I'm not the janitor. He's delusional. Get him out. The audio boomed. It was 10:00 p.m. The cleaning crew was there. The night shift security. The investment bankers working late on the 30th floor. They all heard it. They heard the theft. They heard the betrayal. They heard the owner's voice being silenced. Marcus stood in the basement. He listened to his own voice echoing down the ventilation shafts. It wasn't a legal victory. Richard could still deny it, but the seed was planted. The doubt. The story. He walked out of the sub-basement. He walked out of the service door into the alley. The rain was falling harder now. He heard sirens in the distance. Richard would call the police again. Marcus pulled up his collar. He began to walk. He didn't know where he was going. He wasn't Marcus King, the billionaire. He wasn't Marcus, the janitor. He was just a man who had told the truth. And for the first time in 6 months, he felt clean. The recording looped for 45 minutes. It played until the police cut the power to the sub-basement. It played until every night shift trader, every security guard, and every cleaner heard the voice of their CEO conspiring to destroy a man for the crime of telling the truth. Marcus didn't wait to see the fallout. He walked 5 miles in the rain. He walked until he reached a small, all-night diner on the edge of the industrial district. He sat in a booth. He ordered coffee. Black. He had no way to pay for it. He sat there until the sun came up, watching the steam rise from the cup, waiting for the inevitable. It didn't happen like in the movies. There were no SWAT teams, no handcuffs. Just a news alert on the television mounted in the corner of the diner. Cyber attack at Sterling Tower. The headline flashed in red. The reporter stood outside the building Marcus owned. Sources say a disgruntled former employee hacked the building's PA system last night, the reporter said, broadcasting a deep, fake audio recording generated by AI, intended to defame the executive leadership. Marcus watched the screen. Richard Sterling appeared. He looked tired. He looked shaken. But he was standing. We are victims of a digital smear campaign, Richard told the cameras. Technology allows bad actors to put words in our mouths, but the truth will prevail. We are increasing security. We are moving forward. Marcus didn't blink. He shouldn't have been surprised. The system didn't panic. It adapted. It absorbed the blow, redefined the narrative, and sealed the crack. Deep fake. It was the perfect lie. Unprovable to the layman, plausible enough to create doubt. The waitress came by. She poured more coffee. Crazy world. Huh, she said, nodding at the TV. Can't believe anything you hear anymore. No, Marcus said. You can't. He drank the coffee. It tasted like ash. It took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of lawyers meeting in windowless rooms. 3 weeks of biometric scans, affidavit reviews, and calls to Geneva. The Olympus Group eventually re-established command. The FACE protocol was deactivated. Richard Sterling was quietly placed on administrative leave. Then, he was allowed to retire. For health reasons, there were no charges filed. The board decided that a public trial would damage the stock price. It was cleaner to pay him $20 million to go away than to admit the CEO tried to steal the identity of the chairman. Julian was fired. Not for fraud, but for breach of conduct. He landed a job at a competitor firm a month later, Senior VP of Sales. The system protected its own, it reshuffled the deck, but the cards remained the same. Marcus returned to Sterling Tower one last time. He didn't wear the jumpsuit. He wore a suit, Italian wool, bespoke. He walked through the revolving doors. The lobby was the same. The marble was white. The sunlight was sharp, but the air felt different. The security guards saw him coming. They didn't stop him. They didn't ask for ID. They stood up straighter. They looked terrified. They knew who he was now. The story had leaked. Not the official story, but the whisper. The janitor was the owner. He was watching us. Marcus walked to the center of the lobby. He stopped at the spot where Julian had spilled the coffee. The stain was gone. A young man was pushing the cart now. He was Hispanic, maybe 20 years old. He saw Marcus standing there. He saw the expensive suit. He stopped his cart. He lowered his eyes. He waited for Marcus to move. Marcus looked at him. He saw the fear, the reflexive submission. The same fear Marcus had acted out for 6 months. "What is your name?" The boy flinched. "Matteo, sir." "Matteo," Marcus said. "Do they treat you well here?" Matteo looked around. He looked at the cameras. "Yes, sir." "Very well. I am lucky to have this job." It was a lie. It was the lie necessary for survival. Marcus reached into his pocket. He pulled out an envelope. Inside was a check. It wasn't $1 million. It wasn't a magic wand. It was enough to pay for college, enough to buy a car, enough to walk away. He held it out. "Take this," Marcus said. Matteo stared at the envelope. "Sir, take it. And leave. Leave the lobby. Leave the building," Marcus said. "Leave this place. Go do something else. Anything else." Matteo took the envelope. His hands were shaking. "Why?" he whispered. "Because," Marcus said, "the floor will always get dirty again." Marcus turned and walked to the elevators. He rode to the 40th floor. The executive suite was empty. The mahogany table had been polished. The water damage from Elias's spill had been repaired. Marcus stood at the window looking out over the city. He had won. He had reclaimed his asset. He had purged the specific bad actors, but he felt a profound defeat. He had thought that by becoming a janitor, he would learn the truth of his company. But he hadn't learned the truth. He had just participated in the lie. He had watched Elias get fired and done nothing. He had watched the girl get intimidated and done nothing. He had waited for the perfect moment of justice, but justice doesn't wait. Justice is perishable. Every day he waited, someone else got hurt. His silence hadn't been a strategy. It had been complicity. He took out his phone. He dialed his broker. "Sell it," Marcus said. "Sir, Sterling Tower, sell it, the whole portfolio. But Mr. King, the market is down. We'd take a loss." "I don't care about the loss," Marcus said. "I want it gone by noon. Who should we sell to?" "It doesn't matter," Marcus said. "Another firm, a bank, an algorithm. Just get my name off the deed." He hung up. He walked out of the office. He took the elevator down. He walked out of the building. He didn't look back. 6 months later, Marcus was in his home, a quiet estate in the countryside. He didn't go into the city anymore. He managed his investments remotely. He gave to charities. He funded scholarships. He tried to buy his way back to a clear conscience. It was a Tuesday morning. He was in his kitchen. He made coffee, dark roast. As he poured it, his hand slipped. The cup tipped. Coffee splashed across the white tile of his kitchen floor. A dark, spreading puddle. Marcus froze. For a second, he waited. He waited for the voice. "Watch it, Pops." He waited for the insult. He waited to be told he was invisible. But there was silence. Just the birds singing outside the window. He was alone. He was safe. He was rich. He walked to the pantry. He didn't call the housekeeper. He didn't call a service. He took out a bucket. He took out a mop. He filled the bucket with water. He walked back to the spill. He knelt down. He dipped the cloth. He wiped the floor. Left to right, clockwise, the motion was muscle memory. It was soothing as he scrubbed. He thought about the title of the story everyone told about him. The Janitor King. They thought the irony was that a king had humbled himself to be a servant. But as the coffee stain disappeared, Marcus realized the truth. The janitor wasn't the disguise. The suit was the disguise. The janitor, the man who cleans up the mess. The man who notices the dirt, the man who kneels to make things right. That was the only honest thing he had ever been. He wasn't mocked because he was secretly powerful. He was mocked because in a world built on power, the act of cleaning is seen as weakness. But it isn't weakness. It is the only thing that keeps the world from rotting. Marcus finished the floor. He rinsed the cloth. He stood up. His knees popped. He looked at the clean white tile. He wasn't the owner of the building anymore. But for the first time in his life, he was the owner of his own hands. And that was enough. He poured another cup. He drank it standing up, and then he went back to work. Thank you for listening. If this story stayed with you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear it.